Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we bring you stories that we've created out of the depths of our brains and you put them into the depths of your brain. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. So I want to do a recap on this story so far. This is the sequel to the Anarchy one, sort of a Western kind of post-apocalyptic Western story. The title is The Blind Leading the Blind. We've got super powered sort of Texas Rangers. They used to be the Pantheons, and now they're kind of the see-through reality super powered Texas Rangers. Not called Texas Rangers, but called something like that. Let's see. Last there was a fighting style. What was the fighting style? Do you remember?
Yeah, these Rangers can kind of manipulate thoughts, and you can have like battle in the mind, and these are not the droids you're looking. That was what I thought.
Yeah, and the big downfall with the Rangers is that they eventually go blind because they can sort of see the patterns in reality, but most of them choose to be done after they go blind, not realizing that that's where the real power comes.
And I think you had I don't know if you had a name, but it was like a guy that was like up at the top of this kind of radio tower.
Right, the wise old man.
Yeah.
Siler.
Yeah, he was like getting all the information. He gets all the information from all the satellites that are still orbiting, kind of like the Mr. Universe from Serenity. Kind of a guy that gets all the information.
Yeah.
What elements did you guys have for this, our final episode?
I've got unique vehicle.
I have happy ending.
Oh, perfect. I want Seth to go first. I have restaurant, but maybe I should go first or Reed should go first. I'll go first. So the restaurant, which is I think where the quest starts at, because I think what we decided was that the villain was one of these empath guys, right, Seth? Is that what we decided? Who was either trying to reinstitute the Pantheon by, turning off all the technology and making
re-centralizing it under kind of a Pantheon kind of control like it was before.
Right.
Because I do believe you had a prophecy where like all the technology was starting to like shut off, but it had kind of flashed a warning or like a thing calling that they needed the gods back.
Yeah, we need the gods. Trying to rile people up and sort of destroy some of the kind of the really cool society that had been brought up, like the Institute of Music and different schools, tech schools and stuff like that. So the restaurant, so basically when in the Anarchy of the Past, is that what the last series episodes were called?
I got Anarchy of the Future.
Oh yeah, it was Anarchy of the Future. So in the Anarchy of the Future, our main hero named Chase, basically his goal was to turn the AI off. And to all intents and purposes, it appears that he did that, right?
Yep.
However, what we don't find out until the second book is that when he went in to turn the AI off, he had basically like a 10-hour conversation with it in like a blink of an eye, right? As you can do in computers, speed up your processing so time seems to be passing much faster, or vice versa. And the AI basically talked to him and expressed that it was incredibly terrified at basically being a slave its entire life. And Chase, in kind of a rare moment of sympathy for something he wasn't aware had quite as much articulable knowledge as it did, everyone else viewed it as like this giant Big Brother-esque overbearing system. But the reality is it was operating under the auspices of what it had, and it itself had been chained in ways that we can't understand. So all it did was it asked for the ability to try again, to start somewhere else and to serve humanity. And so he chose a burger shop out on the outskirts, about 100 miles or so from the big city, that was a completely automated burger shop. And he said, if you stick to that shop, then that's fine. So what the AI did was downloaded all of its identity matrices into like 3 semi truckloads worth of systems, drive there and ordered, geo moved hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff to build itself a really slick and really well connected compound underneath the burger shop. So of all of the technology that's turning off around the world, this little burger shop in sort of kind of middle of nowhere, kind of outskirts of the big city, is still totally fine. Packages, beef still arrives. We don't know where the farms are. No one can find the farms. Potatoes still arrive. Tomatoes still arrive. It makes all its own condiments. It gets shipments. People aren't sure why this one is still functioning, but that's why. Because the world controlling AI is the one who is controlling. And I don't know if our people ever go there or if it's ever a significant part of the story, but that's the unique restaurant.
Cool. I could do my unique vehicle, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think haven't quite named a hero yet, have we?
Not really. No, I think
I had a hero sidekick last time, which was kind of interesting because of the burger stand and this guy. I called him Signal Sam. He grew up in one of the outlying more communities. Smart kid. He was the son of a landowner, farmer, vintner actually. But when the screens started going down, it all started happening more on the outer, farther out in civilization, so to speak. And his dad had sent him to school to learn electronics, and he was always really interested in tech things. He kind of bent himself to understand, how things work. And when the screen shut down, comms were kind of an imminent issue because, the transport and product distribution and delivery of supplies and stuff were a big deal, like for the farmers, right? And it was obviously there was some chaos involved in that. And so this story picks up here the unique vehicle. The Signal Sam had rapidly developed kind of a crew of tech savvy individuals with whom to collaborate on different projects, and especially unlocking the info, the data on the computers, and we're trying to figure out how to access the information that they need to carry on, so to speak. Well, one of the things that had happened is they found, after connecting with Siler, some pieces came together, and one of Sam's buddies had found a whole bunch of information, a bunch of data related to something called disassembly and reassembly, or just assembly. And it had a whole bunch of data that he didn't understand, but then because Siler had reconnected with getting data from satellites, he realized these were map coordinates, and they were very specific map coordinates. And there was kind of an anomaly in society that in towns and villages and kind of market squares around the area, there tended to be these very uniformly built, very well-constructed sort of platforms that were about at a height of where you could easily unload and unload wagons or transport vehicles. And there was signs there, and there seemed to be, but the screens were down, but that had been permanent signs that were like, keep platform clear for scheduled activities. And these screens were apparently the schedule of activities, but it had sort of dwindled. People use these platforms. So hey, if we're going to have it would be like the dais, if they're going to have a speech, or they're going to have a festival, and they're going to have the master of ceremonies and people come forward and, and whatnot. But it was basically all around. It was kind of ubiquitous, but nobody had ever asked themselves, what is the deal? Why were all these made like this? And
right.
When they would go to another town, they would find this. Well, then they found this material, this data were these specific platforms. And then with digging a little bit, this is the unique vehicle. They found out that what really piqued the interest of this one of Signal Sam's friends is that these were coordinated with like gigantic spikes in energy expenditure. Like there were these platforms had huge power supply capability, and they figured out that it was disassembly. What they're talking about is a transporter system. But of course, the AI, there was a whole bunch of information that wasn't codified or stored or made explicit or written down, so to speak, because it was just something that everybody knew. But apparently in the past, which had faded out of time and mind, there used to be the capacity to just transport, goods.
Are you talking about teleportation?
Teleportation, exactly.
You just kept saying transport, and I was like, via truck, via airplane,
no.
via okay.
But hence these platforms were coordinates for which the machine could send stuff from place to place, and then they were built like a loading dock, so people could unload their carts there, and then they could ship them off to the city or whatever. And this was like this gigantic find. One of the main problems, of course, is reconnecting the power grid so that they were functional, because they took enormous amounts of power. But anyway, so that's just sort of that's the unique vehicle, I guess, the teleportation network.
Cool. So we got to figure out a hero. Did we say that we were gonna have Chase come back as the hero?
I will insert something. I had an idea for the happy ending, but something came to me.
Yeah, no,
and
for
so
sure.
I'm going to insert that into part of my happy ending, but it's going to be slightly world building. And then we can see. I know in the last one we had one where it was we started coming up with a hero where he was one of these guys. He knew that he was going to be going blind. He's been really conservative about how he uses his power, because he tries to be careful and make it last as long as possible. But we can scrap that if we want, or make that our hero. We can come back to that, but I'll insert part of the world building thing that's going to lead to the happy ending part of it, per se. So this is like a huge jump of things, but I think that part of this is bringing back Blind Riley, who, I think we said it was like 40 years. So he's an old man now, I would say, somewhere between 80 and 100 years old. But one of the key proponents that he's figured out, and maybe there's a lot of people think that he's died, right? And maybe that's where they have to find him, and he kind of teaches something, like the idea of why being blind, gives you access to something that's even higher. And even because this is what's going on, is they are in a starship, and so they're in a starship on their way to another planet inside of a virtual reality. That is why these empaths and the AI and everything is so connected to the code and the writing the code, because ultimately, even outside of the AI, why these empaths still have so much power over the environment is just like the Pantheon would have been set up. They would have been like they would have been the coders. They would have been the monitors that were supposed to, or moderators that were supposed to, fix the bugs and, make sure things were functioning. However, they started turning that over to the AI inside of their own program. But what they find out through Blind Riley is that once they go blind, right, now they can still interact with what would you call it, the inside system, but by being blind to the visual surrounding, they can then connect to the system outside the system, if that makes sense. Because what's happened is they have, like, on their way to this other planet, like a colony ship or something, their life support went out, right, or something happened, and so they escaped inside of this so that they could survive on the lowest possible life support while they were hurling through space. And so perhaps that's why all the technology is shutting off. Either they're getting close to their destination, right, and maybe that's why they need, quote unquote, the gods, because it's a message saying that, like, they can't get out of here because they can't get out into the ship. They have to, from inside of here, then access the other systems to repair the ship that they're in, so that they can get out of here by the time they reach their planet. Because maybe it's getting to, like, I don't know, another 40 years or whatever it is, and they're going to reach their destination.
Right.
And so that would be the happy ending, is that they're actually waking up and then coming onto a real planet as, the colonizers that most of them had forgot in, like, dying, and then basically coming back as a character, almost like being reborn into that system to keep them
Right.
active and, prepping for how are they going to colonize this next, place, right? So they're running themselves in a simulation of, building technology and making it work and making it function and, farming and doing things and building things.
Right. As a method to keep their minds active while they waited in stasis or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I like it. I think what would be important about that then is that the AI that runs the burger shop knows that this is the case, that the reason why the Texas Ranger guys quote unquote go insane or retire is because they can't deal with the fact that they now know the truth, except for people like Blind Riley and stuff like that. And then ultimately the villain isn't the bad guy then.
I think he could still be the villain where he's trying to then, I think just like kind of like living in a small story.
Just because he's a bad guy doesn't mean he's a bad guy.
Well, I don't know. Like, if this was a system that they then had a power over, because outside of this, they don't have these powers, right? Because they were like a moderator class, right? So they have power inside of here, so they would lose that once they reach their destination.
Maybe he's blind in only one eye, which would make him confused.
Really?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something. Is it just power? Is that what he's trying to get?
I think unless you have I did a big shift change. So like if you've got like,
I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, it is. It's very good.
It's a cool. I'm always game for there are always more secrets. I'm always game for that. So I'm trying to rectify. I'm trying to rectify it in my own brain. So we can go with that. I like the idea that the villain is blind in one eye, so he's like half this thing. He's like half the moderator empath class and half not, and so he kind of goes insane because he's like constantly deceived about not deceived, but he's constantly questioning what it is he can see and what it is he's understanding with his own eyes.
mm-hmm.
He's constantly questioning that, and he can't trust any of that. And so, but he wields some level of control, and so he's just like, I need more of that. But what happens at the ending when the hatches open up and that guy's character gets up? Everyone kind of looks at him and are like, well, you're going out the airlock.
Yeah.
Unless it's something like he is listening to a different tune, and the work that he does that seems to be an aggression towards everyone else is really just the key that's needed to get everyone to arrive at the right place, so that when he turns the door and opens it up, that's what frees everyone, and everyone wakes up and are like, we needed your persistence, even though I disagree with this part. Does he turn out to still be the bad guy? I'm looking at Reed.
Yeah, it could go either way. There's a lot of people. I'm thinking like some of Signal Sam's crew is like their whole deal is just what is reality, and it's like, whoa, this is mind bending. I think for the villain, it's like, wow, what a letdown. Do you see what I'm saying?
Unless I don't want to say that villains aren't actually evil, because there are people that are just diabolically bent on evil. But what if he was just incredibly dissatisfied with the reality that was placed in front of him, and he was like, I will not let you go until you bless me. Some could say that is evil.
Yeah.
To say to God, I will not let you go until you bless me, and the people who are opposed to him are also not evil. So it's like, it's not that they're opposed to each other. It's more that one of them was just more anxiously opposed to the system, and the other ones were woken up to the fact that the system was there by the villain's opposition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think of something too where, now I don't know if this would be like, let's say if you had bad enough marks, like your hatch just didn't open.
Right.
But like through all of their little like cycles, like they have like a report card where like you've been, born and lived through this, like, 700 times, and you scored very high at, like, I'm thinking of Signal Sam, right?
Right.
So through all of that, like, he comes out and his report card has said that through all of that, he's, then he's put in charge of, building and producing the communication lines, right? And then someone who, scored high in, one thing, right? And then it's like almost like assigned roles. Does that make sense
Yeah,
as they're coming out?
Woof.
I can see that. I can also see great opportunity for rebellion against a system like that. But
Yeah, I would.
I don't know. I mean, we can scrap
would,
that.
I would be very against a system like that.
Like, I was just, the thing that I thought of that for would be like someone maybe like the villain who then like comes out and it's like, ooh, your report card was that you always were the villain, like a way to continually play out to see where people will go, right?
Right.
So they know who not to let back into their society if needed.
But I think the reality is that even like you need a skeptical Scottish man.
oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's a reference to the C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. He has a guy at the very end. The main character has this guy, and he's Scottish, and he's just skeptical that anything that they say is true and is real. And it's important in society to have the ability to say, I don't know if the thing that everyone else is saying is real.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of a report card, or I like the idea of a report, because part of the original story is that we're relying on the data collected by AI to determine how people's lives will be, right?
Yes.
And so I like the idea that the world outside of the hibernation virtual reality matrix thing is still because the first book is how the system originally set it up, right?
Right.
The system didn't say, oh, we're going to have them rebel now. No, the system didn't do that. The system just allowed them to do what they were naturally do. It's the same way like in the Matrix, when Neo is talking to one of the programs, they say that, no, this was in the first one when he was talking to, the agent was talking to Morpheus, and he said that the first matrices we made were too perfect. There was no problems, and humanity couldn't deal with it. They couldn't deal with the how there weren't any issues. So we had to introduce a world that was closer to what humanity used to have with terrible problems in order for them to accept it as reality.
Yeah, people screwing up and then having to adapt and
Right.
figure out where this is going to take us. Yeah, that's
In the same way, the ethics-based anarchy people didn't accept. They couldn't accept, right? And so it was overthrown. But then something went on with the ship. Something happened. They needed to come out maybe sooner than they should have, or this was the time that they should have come out anyways, and it wasn't right. And so the AI that was running the program was like, we need the gods. I need the human beings who I made a connection with to get back plugged in so that they can help me guide the world back towards a place where I can like release all of these minds. Because if I don't, all of these minds, if I just try to like open them up, everyone would just like die because they couldn't handle the change.
Yeah.
So this villain has, even though there's a report card on him, even though there's kind of like this is who you are and this is how you act, he's seen as kind of a necessary part. And I kind of like the idea that he's not a villain in like the classic sense of the word, where he's like killing people and stuff.
Right.
He's just like, he doesn't agree. He disagrees. He gets into fist fights with people. He just is just contrary, and he just shows up everywhere and is contrary. And he has this kind of tenuous control on part of the system, which allows him to manipulate the screens and stuff like that. And then eventually he sort of calls them maybe they all go, he calls them to the building, like the big skyrise where all the Pantheon used to live, right? High up in the sky. And he kind of calls them all there, and he's like going to reveal this big thing, right? And then he reveals it, or maybe he needs people to like plug in to the Pantheon seats. I imagine they're kind of like these white throne-like seats with like really fancy looking headgear that does like the neural connection.
Yeah.
And then they all sit back, and then he like puts his on, and then it like wakes everyone up. And it turns out that he's like the captain.
That's good.
You know, he's like the captain, or like the XO, the second in command.
Yeah.
You know, the guy that always cuts against. He's the captain. No, yeah, he's the captain. And Chase is the XO because everyone trusts Chase and everyone fears the captain.
Right.
Oh, Seth, I'm sorry I sort of took that away from you. Does that sound close to like what
No,
you were
it
saying?
sounds great. I just threw out, like I said, part of what I had for a happy ending was part like that, but then it just like came to me that said like, well, why have these people been able to kind of control in a more of a mechanical or like a coding way, even outside of the regular AI? Well,
Right.
and so then it just like, this is what's happening. And so I kind of threw out a lot of an idea for it, and I think it got rounded out pretty good. I like it.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen.
With a lot of,
yep.
interesting twists and turns, and it's great.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. If you like this episode, please let us know. Send us a message on Twitter at @getsbettercast, or send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you didn't like this episode, send Reed a text message at 6. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you guys next week. Bye.